let's dive right into this explainer. So, you probably already know that Chapter 15 codes are literally some of the most frequently audited in the entire medical billing universe. The stakes here are just incredibly high. We're kicking off part 1 of a massive 10-part training series focused entirely on mastering ICD-10-CM Chapter 15. This is the big one: pregnancy, childbirth, and the puerperium. As coders, we do this daily balancing act, right? We're protecting the hospital's revenue, ensuring 100% compliance, all while trying to decipher some, let's just say, very creative physician handwriting. Today, we're going to start by looking at a board of outcomes and the absolute foundational sequencing rules you need to lock down so those claims don't bounce back.
So, our agenda for today: first, we'll hit the general Chapter 15 coding rules. Then, we'll move on to ectopic and abortive outcomes, followed by post-abortion complication sequencing, and wrap it all up with a real-world clinical case walkthrough. All right, Section 1, Chapter 15, Coding Rules. Let's lay down the absolute baseline. Okay, so here is the golden rule of Chapter 15, sequencing priority. 000 through 09A codes take absolute precedence. They've got to be sequenced first on your chart unless there is a very specific contraindication. Sequencing this first tells the immediate story. The patient is pregnant, delivering, or postpartum, and that completely dictates the context of their care. Why is this a big deal for us? Well, if you sequence a routine symptom, say a standard headache, over the pregnancy code, that claim is going to get flagged and denied so fast. The only exception is if a provider explicitly documents that a condition is completely incidental to the pregnancy. But honestly, those cases are super rare. So when in doubt, Chapter 15 always comes first.
This chapter is wildly comprehensive. It covers the entire patient journey, from prenatal care right through pregnancy complications, the delivery itself, and all the way into the postpartum period. Think of it like a continuous clinical timeline. Whether you're coding routine supervision for a high-risk first trimester, or an acute delivery complication in the labor ward, or even a postpartum infection 6 weeks later, Chapter 15 is your home base. It's built to capture every single nuance of that journey, ensuring the complex care is fully represented and accurately reimbursed.
Moving right along to Section 2, ectopic and abortive outcomes.
Let's start by looking at 000.1, tubal pregnancies. This is when a fertilized ovum implants outside the uterine cavity, specifically in the fallopian tube. Clinically, it's actually the most common type of ectopic pregnancy. But here's the kicker for us coders. Your accuracy here relies entirely on having ultrasound or surgical findings clearly documented in the chart. You literally cannot assign this code just based on a clinical suspicion. Here's a quick pro tip for your workflow. If you see 000.1 marked as suspected in the progress notes, don't just take it at face value. Go cross-reference the radiology or operative reports to confirm it before you drop that code. It'll definitely save you from an audit later.
Now, this right here is absolutely crucial. You have to cleanly separate a spontaneous incomplete abortion from an elective procedure. Code 03.4 is specifically for an incomplete spontaneous abortion, basically a miscarriage where products of conception are still retained. To use this compliantly, your provider has to document both the incomplete nature of the event and the associated complications, like hemorrhage or retained tissue. Mixing up a spontaneous miscarriage with an elective termination is basically a fast track to a massive compliance audit. You really have to read those provider narratives like a detective to make sure the clinical story matches the code.
So, what happens when a procedure is unsuccessful? If a termination attempt fails and the pregnancy continues, 07.1 is going to be your primary code. You'll also use this if adverse outcomes pop up from that attempt. But remember, 07.1 almost never stands alone. You've got to layer on additional codes for specific secondary complications. For example, if a failed termination results in a severe pelvic infection, you sequence 07.1 first, and then add the specific infection code to tell the whole story. Oh, and make sure the provider explicitly documented the actual method of the attempted termination to support the combo.
All right, let's pivot to Section 3, post-abortion complications sequencing.
Take a look at this table. It's really interesting how cleanly the 008 subcategories map out the complications. We go from general tract and pelvic infections at 008.0 all the way to life-threatening stuff like embolism, shock, and renal failure down at 008.4. These are designed specifically to capture severe, acute complications following an abortion, ectopic, or molar pregnancy. Knowing exactly which subcategory to use is a real game changer for accurately reflecting the clinical weight of the encounter. Okay, listen carefully to this isolated rule because it trips up a lot of people. 008 codes are strictly for subsequent, follow-up encounters, never the initial procedure. If a patient experiences a complication during the actual abortion encounter, you do not use an 008 code. These only trigger when the patient returns specifically because a complication popped up later. Think of it like this. Day 1, initial procedure. Minor issue, but they stabilize and go home. No 008. Day 5, they come back to the ER with excessive bleeding and a high fever. Boom, now you trigger the 008 category. Timing is absolutely everything here.
To keep things compliant and protect that revenue cycle, your documentation has to explicitly link the clinical findings to the complication. You also need to specify the exact abortion type. Was it spontaneous, elective, therapeutic? Plus, the provider has to document the exact timing to prove it actually warrants an 08 code on a follow-up visit. If the notes are vague on the timing or the link to the prior abortion, don't guess. Send a provider query. A quick query today is going to prevent a massive denial tomorrow.
Finally, let's bring it all together in Section 4, Clinical Case Walkthrough.
All right, put your coder hats on. We've got a 22-year-old patient at 10 weeks gestation presenting with heavy vaginal bleeding, abdominal pain, and retained products of conception. So how would you accurately capture this patient's clinical picture? Let's trace the logic together.
Let's break it down step by step. Step 1, identify the abortion type. The documentation shows a spontaneous miscarriage. It's an unplanned event, definitely not elective. Step 2, note the complications. Here, we've got heavy bleeding and the crucial fact that products of conception are retained, meaning it's incomplete. Combining those facts for Step 3, we bypass the elective codes entirely and land firmly on 003.4, incomplete spontaneous abortion with other complications. Breaking it down this way ensures your coding will hold up against any audit for sure.
Nailing these foundational rules for Chapter 15 is going to save you so much time and keep your compliance airtight. But what happens when the pregnancy advances and multiple gestations start complicating the picture? We're going to tackle that entire maze next time. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for Part 2. This is Decode Healthcare with Harshal.